Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. And yeah, I just did things that a weekend calls us to do. How was your weekend, beautiful Brice? Welcome. Nice to see you again, all brown and tanned and stealing my sun.
I know. I keep worrying that my sun's gonna go away because now I'm out inside most of the. So I keep trying to go out and like catch the sun. That's the good thing about being a Vata. Like you and I are both very Vata, which we've spoken about, and we Vatas take in sun and we hold sun. I mean, I'll be outside for 5 minutes and I've got sun. So I'm that's one part of my anatomy that I really am grateful for because it's fun. It feels good to have the sun on your skin and stuff. So, but I'm excited. We haven't done a Monday show in a while, have we?
I know it's been a couple of weeks because you've been gallivanting across the countryside again. So that's right. It's nice to have you back. And wherever it is you've been, you can see you've got yourself nice and tanned. So
well, I've missed my gossiping murderous Monday group. I have to say.
So and everyone, it's good to see everyone in the chat again as well. Really good to see you all.
You know, Shanti, off air, we were talking about how over these like 4 years or whatever we've been on YouTube, how we're kind of some of the last people still going strong. You know, so many people have fallen off of the quote unquote truthers. And it's like you, me, Catherine, like there's a few of us who are still just like going strong. And I have to say, I think a lot of that is the relationship we have with our friends that watch, because it's so much more fun to talk about these topics with a larger group. You know, we can laugh together. We can laugh. And I think that's really important because when we get into some of these popes, like what we're going to talk about, I was saying this is like some crazy crap we're going to look at. And even though it's quite horrific what they were doing, I think what our audience, especially because we read the comments, you guys are hysterical. Like the fact that we can look at this stuff with humor, it just takes the power away from the dark ones, right? When we can actually like look at them and like laugh at their ridiculousness. And so I have to say, I missed all of our Monday group these last couple weeks. It's so fun to gossip about these assholes with everybody else.
Totally. Very, very fun. But I'm interested to hear what today's show is about because Pope Innocent the Eighth. The satanic Pope. And the one who was drinking breast milk. I mean, that is just disgusting.
I'm so sorry
to think about this old, creepy, old, disgusting old freak drinking breast milk. I mean, and then, of course, KIDSs as well.
And the red, he was drinking the red stuff too. We'll get to that. And in fact, they were so open about his hobby, I'll say, habit of drinking the red stuff, that basically historians have said, oh, he was experimenting. He was the first person to experiment with the blood transfusion, which is bullshit. We know that it was basically a way to cover up what he was doing. And I will say, you want to throw his picture up quickly, Shanti, just so people can see this monster, this fat ass. He was so fat. He was obviously enjoying.
I mean, he really is just a creepster. Look at him. I mean, sitting there. I mean, and those hands. Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look quickly, his robe looks like it's thousands of snakes wrapped around him.
He's disgusting.
No, he is definitely. And it's funny, I'm just seeing now, when you're looking at that badge or whatever it was, it actually looked like a beetle of sorts. And if you look at the tip of the head, it looks like a burrowing. So it's like burrowing in. I actually really thought, but I see now it's obviously maybe the, what do you call that thing? Crest.
Oh yeah, it's. I don't know if that. Well, this is the thing too, and so for people who we were laughing off air because we get so much blowback when we cover like religious topics, but Shanti and I are literally equal opportunists. We're gonna go after all the religions. So for all the Mormons that have sat through us tearing apart the Mormon Church, now we're gonna go after the cat. Like we're equally going after all religions. And so yeah, that might be and if we have audience members who grew up Catholic, please feel free to like let me know if there's some information that I'm not seeing, because I didn't grow up Catholic. I grew up Presbyterian. So to understand the the corporation of the Catholic Church is new to me as a researcher. And so if I've missed something and you understand it, please let me know in the comment section. Again, this is why I don't sit around and study these stories just for myself. This is why I opened my channel, was to be able to go over these stories and have everybody else's input as well, because multiple heads are better than one. And yeah, we're going after all. I told Shanti, I was like, the one religion I haven't really touched yet is Islam. And that's mainly because I don't know that much about Islam. I know a little bit about it, but I don't know enough to really see where there's cracks. Because I grew up in a Christian home, so it's easy to like see the Catholicism or even Mormonism, because we already have that background information of the Bible already in us. So it becomes an easier task. But with religions that I'm just not familiar with that at all, it's going to be a lot harder. So just because we haven't gone after Islam doesn't mean it's not on the list. It just means it's going to take a while to get there, because it involves more research. But I told you, so one of the most fascinating, my favorite families in all of history, and this is saying a lot, you guys, because I love history. As I've said, I'll say it every day. Tell your kids, if your kids are complaining about their history classes, just tell your kids history ain't nothing but drama and gossip. That's all it is. That's why history is so fun. So one of my favorite historical families that I've mentioned off and on my channel are the Borgias. And we're leading, and I'm actually shocked it's taken 4 years to cover the Borgias. And that's what I want to cover, is the Borgias. But I can't start with the Borgias until we look at the Pope, who was poping around before Borgia, because I think that kind of sets the scene of what was going on historically at the time of all of this like sadistic debauchery. You know, the Borgia family themselves, I think they're so famous because it wasn't just Rodrigo Borgia that got famous, but his kids got, they were all doing scandalous shit. So we have to kind of set the scene though. And of course, Pope Innocent VIII was the Pope before Rodrigo Borgia. He is known as the Satanic Pope because of some of his shenanigans. But I want to set the scene a little bit before we go into what was going on, so that we have sometimes I think it's hard, and I think we're all guilty of doing this. When we look at history, I think sometimes we naturally want to view history through the lens of our own time, our own timeline, right? So it's hard for us sometimes. And I'm going to paraphrase. There's a famous quote that goes something like, history is a foreign country. They do things differently there. So sometimes, even though human beings, at the end of the day, we all go through love, deceit, betrayal, the emotions are still there. The customs and cultures of society very much kind of dictated and narrated how some of these stories unfolded. And what was happening then obviously doesn't have a place for now, but we can also see similarities between what was happening then and what was happening now. Because when we look at Pope Innocent VIII, we're looking at, and the Borgias, we're looking at the Italian Renaissance. Now, with that being said, when the Renaissance happened, of course, a lot of us look back at the Renaissance and we study the Renaissance as being this time of enlightenment, this time of, we've just come out of the Dark Ages, all that kind of stuff, where now there's more understanding of humanness. We're starting to see understanding, a deeper study of the cosmos, all this kind of stuff. But I think what we forget is with that Renaissance also came the friction of change. I mean, look at what we're going through now. I think if you think it's like 500 years from now, people might look at this time and go, oh man, it was like a Renaissance again. They were rediscovering these old works and re-looking at these things. But look at all the other friction we're also going through that might kind of get ignored. And so I kind of wanted to set that up. I also want to say before we get started, because I know we're going to get comments about this, because we always do. If you're new to Shanti's channel or my channel, both Shanti and I think I can speak for you, Shanti, we've talked about Tartaria before. We are very well aware that there is an alternative timeline. We are very well aware that there are things in our history that might not be correct. With that being said, when we look at these famous families in these situations, I'm going to be using the official narrative. That doesn't mean that I'm not aware that there could be an alternative reality that we just haven't seen yet. But for me, as somebody that's riding this ride with all of you, with all y'all, as we say in the South, I'm trying to keep both perspectives open until we know for sure. I'm not trying to close my mind to anything at this point because anything is possible. There could be truth in the mainstream narrative as well as truth in Tartaria. You know, there could be truths in both, right? We just don't know yet. And so with that being said, as we talk about Innocent VIII and the Borgias, I am once again going to be referring to the mainstream narrative with the understanding that it could be wrong. Okay, so before we get those comments in the comment section, we're aware. All right, so let's talk about what was going on in Italy at this time. I mean, Shanti, if I could time travel and be invisible and no one could see me, I would grab my popcorn and I would time travel to this time period and just watch. Because y'all, you know, we have talked about so many times that if I had to live in this time, which we were laughing, we probably did live in this time. That's why we're so pissed now on YouTube channels. But I would want to be a peasant. Like, let me just be a blacksmith. Like, I just want to bake bread for a living because literally the lives, these people, you know, these people had shorter lives. I don't think because medicine wasn't that great. I think they just got killed because that's just what happened, you know, with these noble families and the papacy. So I want to kind of set the scene. If we can step back a little bit and kind of understand what was happening in Europe at the time of Pope Innocent and of course the Borgias. So Italy, the peninsula of Italy at this point was not a country. And I heard a historian, I was listening to a historian focus on this time period, and she explained it this way, and I thought this was brilliant. As an American, as Shanti being a South African, wherever all y'all are in the world, our countries at this point are considered political entities. All right. So the United States of America, South Africa, these are political entities known as countries. You think about America, we often refer to the United States as a she. Like she's our homeland. It has its own kind of person, right? The countries. That wasn't the same back at this time. You know, at this time, even though people did have paperwork, there weren't passports. I mean, most of the peasants didn't even know when they were born. People could interchange throughout these different territories pretty easily. And Italy at this point, you know, it was broken up into little duchies or principalities. So you had the Kingdom of Naples, which we're going to speak about a little bit with Innocent VIII, which is where Rome is. Roma. It was in the Kingdom of Naples. You had, you know, Florence. You had Venice. You had Milan. Like all these areas were not unified as one country. They were considered Italian people. That was already an understanding of like culturally and ethically who they were, but they were their own countries. So it would be like in the United States if all of our states were their own countries and we were just intermingling with the other states, right? So with that being said, now again, guys, as far as the mainstream narrative is concerned, when we were looking at Pope Innocent VIII, this is also right before the alleged discovery of America. Now, when we think about after Christopher Columbus and all the settlers came to America, America, if you think about the continent, was a political hotspot to grab because the soil, especially in the colonies where I live, the soil was so good and fertile that many of these dynasties, these monarchs could make money off of selling cotton, selling tobacco, you know, and so that's why like England and France and Spain fought wars over America. Well, now take that same concept that we know of with America and put it on Italy. That's what was happening in a much smaller territory in Italy. So you have all these kingdoms, these duchies in Italy. Italy has, I love Italy. It's a beautiful country. It's very similar to the weather here in Georgia. It's a little bit hotter here in Georgia, but it's fertile. It's a very fertile agricultural peninsula. It's perfect for making money. And so with these different duchies, you have these different empires like France, Aragon and Castile. Spain isn't even a country. You still have Aragon and Castile. They're fighting for different territories in Italy to make money. On top of that power grab, we have this new, with the Renaissance, we have this new form of power that's coming into play. And these are bankers. We know fully well about bankers in 2024. But before the Renaissance, before the de' Medici family, which we talked about, Catherine de' Medici, before the Florentine banking family of the de' Medicis, most of the power players were nobility. were royals. And all of a sudden now we have this new issue with banking. Because the De Medicis, they were not considered nobility. They were considered a common family that became more powerful because now they have control of money. All right. So it is this is like Days of Our Lives shit show that's happening. People are gunning for each other in this it's all happening in this tiny little peninsula. All this crap is happening on this peninsula. Now, on top of this, just to add even more to this like disaster that's happening, this glorious disaster, when we think about the cardinals of the Catholic Church or the Pope, we know that they are not supposed to get married and have children, right? We've been told the propaganda, the fake news propaganda of why they can't get married and have children is because they're representing, the Pope is a representation of Jesus, right? And they tell us now in 2024, the propaganda is that Jesus was never married, so therefore the Pope can't get married. Well, that's not true. And back in the Renaissance, during this time, even the common folk knew that that was not the reason why. The reason why the cardinals and then the Pope were not able to get married was because the Vatican had a crap ton of money and wealth. And if the Pope himself or the cardinals had legal children, meaning they were married and they had legal children, those children would then be able to inherit the wealth of the Vatican, so the Vatican itself would lose power. Now, I say legal children because, again, we have to remember in 2024, in most countries, if a child is born outside of wedlock, the court system still acknowledges that child as the child of the parents, and therefore that child will inherit from the parents. All right, regardless of whether the parents were married or not. Back then, that was not the case. If there was a child born out of wedlock, that child was not eligible. They were. I hate the word bastard. I think it's gross, but that's what they were considered, right? Yeah. So that is why they were not able to get married. Now, you even look back at like Henry VIII in England, which he's actually going to come into play next week. But even at this point, like when Henry VIII divorced Catherine of Aragon, his daughter Mary, Princess Mary, was then stripped of the title princess. She became lady because then all of a sudden she was considered illegitimate because her parents got divorced. So even with divorce situations at this time, a child would lose their legitimacy. All right. So with that being said, it was very common at this time for cardinals and popes to have children. They had a crap ton of children. They had mistresses, chief mistresses. Everybody knew who their baby mama was. There was no secret. The only reason, again, they couldn't marry the baby mama was so their kids could not take the power of the Vatican. However, the children, the reason why I'm bringing this up, not only is this going to play into next week's story, but it's going to give you even a deeper idea of all the debauchery and the bribery and just the scandal that was going on. Even with Pope Innocent, so Pope Innocent had about 8 kids. All right. So all of them, they all had kids. It was very open. It was very much acknowledged. Oh, that's Pope Innocent's kids. That's Borgia's kids. These children, even though they were not legitimate children, they were still treated like royalty. They were still treated like princes and princesses, because what would happen, y'all, it's so scandalous. What would happen? It was in the best interest for these cardinals and these popes to have children because it helps secure their place in the papacy. So so let's back up again. You've got all these duchies and all these European powers fighting for the peninsula of Italy, for their land. We've got the banking family. These banks are starting to become a powerful thing. We first saw this with the Knights Templar at the Knights of Malta, which you guys can go back and watch that episode we did. Now we're going through into where now we've got the De Medicis, we've got the banks, right? So we are taught to believe that when a pope dies and the new pope comes, but the cardinals meet and it's supposed to be God inspired, and when they pick the new pope, the smoke comes out of the chimney. No. Y'all, God ain't a part of the Vatican. God never was a part of the Vatican. The Vatican was a political entity in itself, all right? So when a pope is picked, he's picked through bribery. So how does this happen? That's why a cardinal needs a crap ton of kids. So let's say we've got the Vatican right in the middle of Italy, right in the middle of all these duchies that all these European powers are fighting for. We know that the Pope sits above the kings in power. The Pope is like the most powerful. He's at the top of the pyramid. So if we know, if Shanti's, let's say Shanti's the king of France and I'm the king of Aragon or Spain, right? Let's say that we know that the Pope that's sitting on the throne right now is about to die. Like he's looking like he's about to die. And we know that there's a few cardinals that are going to be nominated to be the papacy. It's in Shanti's best interest as the king of France to start to talk to the cardinal that's probably about to take the papacy. So what Shanti's going to do is she's going to go to this little cardinal or send her messengers and be like, hey, I understand you're in the running for the next papacy. I will support you as the king of France. I will promote you if you promise that when you become the king of France, the Pope, you can help me secure more land in Italy. And I will, to scratch your back, to help you out, if you do that for me, I will make sure that your daughter is married into my royal family. I'll make sure your son is given titles in my country. Right? So these kids that the cardinals are birthing are used as pawns to secure the power of the cardinal to become. Does that make sense? You guys, it's so scandalous. It's so scandalous. And the kids, because the kids were such pawns, they literally had free reign. Those kids, the kids of the cardinals, like ran the Vatican. They were treated right like royalty. The cardinals claimed their children. They did give their children their last names, even though they were not legitimate. We also know there was a lot of relationships between like uncles and nephews, which we're going to see again with Borgia, since the father could not give his son places within the Vatican if he wasn't the Pope. Oftentimes he would get his nephew. And it's important that you have family with you, not because you love them and you want them to have a good, prosperous life, but because it's going to help secure you with all that power. Does that make sense? You guys, this is why I'm like, I saw somebody just put peasant life for me. We should make like a t-shirt that says, I'll take the peasant life. Like this is so stressful and they're constantly turning their backs on each other. So if you know, especially if like the upcoming Pope is from like Spanish background, you already know he's going to have allegiance to Spain. So if you're the French guy, you're going to come in and be like, bonsoir, mi amigo. I'm going to give your kids a bunch of titles in France if you back me over Spain in getting a hold of some of this fertile land in Italy. All right. So while we having the birth of this great art in this enlightenment, we're in the Renaissance. You know, even though there's a huge improvement in our understanding, there's also this shady shit happening too, as well. Openly happening. Because what are the peasants going to do? What are they going to do? They're not going to be able to do anything, right? So, and we also know that this is also right before the Protestant Reformation. So I laugh and say, like, God is not a part of the papacy. Like, there's no time where they're like actually contemplating God. It is a political grab, but they can keep control of the peasants by the manipulation of God, which they're still doing, right? Religion.
Yeah.
Because there's more peasants than there are nobles. So they got to keep the peasants under wraps. So that's why they controlled the religion, even though religion was not really a part of their daily lives in this political, it was totally a political arena. You know, so all right, so let's does that make sense? If that does not make sense, please let me know and I'll try to re-explain it. So just knowing that's the backdrop of what we're walking into with these stories, let's get into it. So Pope Innocent VIII was actually born Giovanni Battista in 1432 in Genoa, Italy. So he actually did come from an Italian family. He was born into a noble family in Italy. And because of that, he received a very good education. That's also the thing about the papacy. If you get involved in the church, working for the churches, you're going to receive an education, which of course that was rare in that time to be able to learn how to just read and write. Now, he did show from a very young age that he was very gifted intellectually. Because of his family connections, Giovanni, Pope Innocent VIII, was able to enter politics at a very young age. Now, this also included this time, just remember, again, as we said, the church and the state are not separate. So we know that anytime we see somebody involved in the church at this time period, this is also going to be a very secular political person as well. They're one and the same. Canon law and civil law are one and the same at this point. So at, let me see here. So he became at a very young age, Capua. He went to the Archdiocese of Capua. And this is a diocese within the Catholic Church in Campania, Italy. Now, this is what I found very interesting as well. This particular archdiocese where young Innocent, I'm just going to call him Innocent, guys, even though that's his Pope name, just to make it not confusing. He was born Giovanni, but we're going to call him Innocent just to keep it straight. So when young Innocent is a young boy, he goes to Capua to work as a cleric for this archdiocese. Now, again, legend states, I found this so fascinating. Legend states that one of Peter, so Saint Peter from the Bible, one of Peter's disciples brought Christianity to this area, making this area one of the first to receive the Christian tradition. So this was a guy named Priscus, allegedly, who was Peter's disciple. Now, he's Saint Priscus now. Now, some people believe that the Last Supper, so the picture, was held at Priscus's house. So he was the one that... Saint Priscus, I don't know if there's any pictures of Saint Priscus, but legend states that he was the disciple, the student of Peter. He served the Last Supper at his house, and then he brought Christianity up to Capua at this time. He was the bishop of Capua for 20 years, and then he was martyred by Nero. So this was back, over 1,000 years ago. Now, what I found was interesting, just because of my knowledge. I have a huge issue with Peter from the Bible. That son of a bitch. He was such a narcissist. Peter from the Bible hated women. He was such a jackass. He was a nasty man. Like, I don't know how Jesus put up with this dude. Like, this dude was horrible. Now, with that being said, it's always bothered me that allegedly the propaganda is that Jesus left the church to Peter to build the rock upon, the rock story where he's, Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica. Well, when you read the missing books of the Bible, that's not what happened. Peter wasn't left jack shit. It was Magdalene and his brother James that were left everything. Of course, that's his wife and his brother, So I've always found it interesting that the shadiness of the church took Peter, who was the actual psychopath, and made him the main person where it all spun from. I just find that to be interesting. In my own opinion, I just find that's very, obviously I didn't know Peter, and I like the name Peter, but I didn't know Peter. So that's just my percept of someone that can read and can see that this is not a good dude. Anyway, so now I just wanted to give that backstory of the archdiocese where Innocent was first sent as a young boy to be the cleric. Now, for me, when I hear that there's a cleric, I think secretary. That was my first impression, was like, oh, he's like a little secretary. But something in my head was like, no, go look this up. What is a cleric? You guys, y'all, guess what a cleric was back then? So a cleric is a priest. So imagine you got a 14-year-old boy priesting you, telling you what to do and where to go and what God wants from you. Like, can you imagine? I want to flick him. I just want to flick him. Like, shut up. You're a kid. But anyway, he comes from a noble family. He's given this education at a very young age. He's sent to be the priest at this particular archdiocese that has connection to St. Peter. These clerics are also, drum roll please, they are the people who are assigned to study the sacred text and perform the rituals. So these are the jackasses that have gotten us in the mess that we're in. Because for some reason, we the people were not good enough to see the sacred text. So we've got these noble families throughout the generations. Their children are coming in, learning the sacred text, keeping it from the rest of the people, performing the rituals. Now, some of these rituals are things like marriage, funerals, but I'm sure there are some secret rituals that, well, I mean, he was drinking the red stuff. So obviously there's some other rituals that are going on
Yeah.
at a very young age. So at a very young age, this innocent dude is, he's the one that's calling the shots, and he's learning this esoteric knowledge in secret, and he's controlling this very important archdiocese of Catholicism. There is no Protestant faith at this point. We're on the eve of the Protestant Reformation. So basically in all of Christendom, right? He is stepping into the role of a very powerful person. All right. So I also want to bring up this idea of simony, which is the buying, sell, that is defined as the buying and selling of either something of a spiritual nature or an object with a spiritual role, such as a church office. This comes from the book of Acts, chapter 8, where Simon Magus actually tries to buy off of Peter a place within the Christian world. So we see this happening, as I was saying earlier, everything that's going on is based off of bribery, off of simony. The buying and selling. In India, it's called bakshish. I love that. I like bakshish better, but yeah. So this is where it's all set leading up to. So at a very young age, his parents have placed their child in a position of great power. Okay, so in 1473, at 41 years old, the age I am now, Pope Innocent, he was Giovanni then, but we're just going to say Innocent, he was given the red hat of the cardinals. So now he's in Rome. He's gone to Rome, and he is one of the super elite, right? The cardinals are super elite. They're the next step below the Pope. And this was under Pope Sixtus IV. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Rome too. I forgot to bring up Rome at this point. Rome in Italy. So Rome is a fabulous city. I love Rome. Rome is a very fast city now. It's beautiful. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of a lot of prana in the air, very narrow streets, beautiful art. At this point, because we're in the dawning of the Renaissance, Rome is a backwaters town. There's not a whole lot. The only main thing happening in Rome is the Vatican. That's it. So as far as like the regular old folk like us, we would be basically peasants living in dirt houses in Rome. Rome was like a very small town. You only go to Rome if you're of anybody of prestige. You only go to Rome to either do business at the Vatican or to work for the Vatican. You're not going to Rome to go see the artwork. It's a very, again, from our lens of perspective, Rome is a fabulous city. Back then, it was not. Okay. With that being said, because of all the simonry and the bakshish and the bribery, it's also a lawless city. Talk about the wild. We're going to get more into that with the Borgias. I mean, you could literally like unalive somebody on the street in Rome and no one's going to say anything, especially if you work for the Vatican. This is a lawless backwaters town. So anybody, again, of noble blood or heritage or anybody coming into Rome, it's for one specific person or one specific reason, and it ain't the pasta, right? It's to work, wheel and deal at the Vatican. Yeah. So he's in Rome now. At 41, he becomes a cardinal. So he's right under the Pope now, Pope Sixtus IV. So Pope Sixtus IV died in 1484. At that point, Innocent was 52 years old. So 32 cardinals were responsible for picking the next pope. On August 29th, 1484, Giovanni Battista became Pope Innocent VIII, again at 52 years old. All right. So a lot of briberies going on. Again, this is not God inspired. This is very much who's got the most money, who's got the most power. We're going to put them in the papacy. And the fact that
using them as a puppet, right?
Because yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to get a little bit. So I want to talk a little bit in how he got, guys, all of these popes, we could probably do like 5 or 6 hour episodes on everything that happened with these popes, but I just want to hit like the really important stuff. And so I would encourage you, if you're super interested in understanding all the bribery and the business and the politics of this time, I would absolutely I always encourage you to research this stuff anyway. I'm just going to talk about the highlights of the life, but you go and like, if you really go research, because it's very fascinating. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how Giovanni became Pope Innocent VIII. Like what happened? Since it wasn't God inspired, how did this particular cardinal, because all the cardinals, they're all coming from noble families. They're all, he obviously has his 8 children at this point that are getting they're getting pampered to push him in a direction. Well, there was a lot of reasons as to why he became the Pope. But the main reason, which is so freaking scandalous, you guys, was because of what was happening in the Kingdom of Naples. So once again, Rome is in the Kingdom of Naples. It's not a country. Italy's not a country. It's in the Duchy of Naples. At this point, the Spanish were in charge of Naples. Now, again, I say Spanish loosely because Spain did not exist at this point. It was Castile and Aragon. It was divided, but the Iberian Peninsula, they were in charge of Naples. And the people, the Spaniards who were ruling Naples, weren't the greatest people in the world. All right. So at this point, the barons who were Italian under the Kingdom of Naples really did not like King Ferdinand I of Naples. You guys, if y'all want at some point to go deep into King Ferdinand I of Naples, this guy is a total, like, this, I would be afraid of this man. So let's talk a little bit about what was going on with Ferdinand I, the guy who's in charge of Naples, who's Spanish, in charge of Naples. So the barons now want to get rid of him. So Ferdinand I was born in Spain. He was the king of Naples from 1458 to 1494, known as an oppressive tyrant. His father, Alfonso, took control of Naples, which actually meant that it was under a foreign house. So if you think about it from the Italians' perspective, in our day and age, it would be like somebody coming into your country from a totally different country and then just taking over, right? Right? So that's what's happening. Now, the barons were pissed off. Also, Ferdinand had something called the Black Museum. Have you heard of this, Shanti, the Black Museum?
No.
Ferdinand was so diabolical that his enemies, I mean, I guess, you got to make a name. It's hard to make a name for yourself when you're really around a bunch of psychopaths. You got to get yourself in history somehow, the history book somehow. What he would do, he had this Black Museum in his house. All of his enemies, and Ferdinand I of Naples had a lot, he would have them killed and he would have them stuffed like animals. And he had this area of his house where he set up his enemies that were stuffed, like at dinner tables.
No, this is just so macabre. I mean, what the hell?
So I don't blame, even though the barons might have been a little shady themselves, I don't blame them for going to Giovanni and being like, bro, if we support you as being the Pope, we'll do whatever you want us to do for your kids, whatever. You just got to get this fucker out of our country. And Ferdinand loved to give tours of his Black Museum. All right. So that there was other things that happened too. But that was like the main thing. And I thought, we can't talk about Innocent VIII without talking about Ferdinand's Black Museum. It's amazing Hollywood has not made a movie about this yet. I'm like, they're missing a really juicy.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
I mean, you don't even have to worry about a screenplay. It just writes itself. It's in the history books. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's just crazy. So I guess it's all that inbreeding and that satanic ritual abuse these people go through that puts them in a mindset. I would throw up. Like if I was brought through a part of somebody's house where they're enemies, and he would show people to basically warn them, like, if you mess with me, you're going to end up stuffed in my Black Museum. Right? So now
that's crazy.
Now, Innocent becomes Pope, and he makes good on his word to the barons by excommunicating Ferdinand I of Naples in 1489. So 5 years after he took the papacy, he excommunicated Ferdinand. Now, what that means, excommunication is a really big deal because, again, the Pope is in charge of everyone. The Pope he's the kingiest of kings. Yeah. I mean, we saw that with what happened with Henry VIII. There was like a whole battle went on when he pulled himself out. And there's no Protestant faith at this point. So if the Pope excommunicates you, you've basically been cut off. So you have nothing. So it's a big deal to get on the Pope's bad side. Now, what Innocent did, though, he screwed the barons over. After he excommunicated Ferdinand, he screwed the barons over by inviting Charles VIII of France to invade Naples. So he invited the French king to come down and invade Naples and take Naples for France. So he did what the barons wanted, but he didn't give the land back to the people of Naples. So what that tells me is that after the barons had come in and said, we'll do whatever you need to get Ferdinand gone, Charles VIII must have come in and said, hey, if you let me come in and take Naples, I'll do even more for you. This is a power play. I mean, these people are so disgusting and diabolical, no integrity whatsoever. All right, so we also have the Ottoman Empire, which this is the same time period as Vlad the Impaler, which we've talked about Vlad the Impaler before. So we've got this issue with the Ottoman Empire, right? The Ottomans are kind of giving us a little bit of an issue now. We talked about them with the Knights of Malta too. They're the other big world power. So we've got some butting heads. And at first, Pope Innocent VIII is saying, I'm gonna plan a crusade against the Ottomans. Guess what happens? What happened was he did not go on a crusade against the Ottomans. Instead, he struck business deals with the Ottomans, with the Turks. You know, at least there was no bloodshed. But if you're trying to sell yourself to the common folk as Jesus's representative on earth, and you're not squashing out the enemy, like it just, you know, you ran on this ticket that you were going to have this big crusade, and you don't. He kind of was a king. Pope Innocent VIII was also the Pope who helped start the witch trials. And we know, and with psychology,
guys we're dealing with, aren't we?
I mean, these guys, I mean, you can't make this up. Like, why hasn't Hollywood made a movie about this yet? Like, they've made plenty of shows about the Borgias. There's a huge, but like, you're missing an easy plot. Like, you can't make this up. You just follow the history books. So we've talked about this with King James, with the King James Bible a long time ago. All of these witch trials, we know that they were convoluted. And they were targeting, these were bloodthirsty men who wanted to torture innocent people. That's my opinion, right?
Yeah.
They weren't, I think these people that got accused of being witches and warlocks of the common folk, most of them probably weren't doing anything at all. If they were doing anything, they were probably just using turmeric, you know, using healing modalities. And they didn't want people having their own power, right? They wanted to go through the sanctity of the church or the cabal, basically. So there was this guy named Heinrich Kramer. Now, Heinrich Kramer was a Germanic churchman and inquisitor. He lived from 1430 to 1505, and historians have described Heinrich Kramer as a superstitious psychopath. So again, with Germanic stuff, there was no Germany at this point. The country of Germany wasn't even established until the 19th century. So there was Germanic principalities. Just like in Italy, there was like Prussia, there were these territories of Germanic people. There were Germanic people, but they were in principalities, just like there were Italian people who were also in principalities. In fact, I think the only countries that were pretty much defined at this point was England and France, because even Spain at this point is two different principalities of Castile and Aragon. So it's very different than what we think of Germany now. It's a very different kind of layout of the land. So Heinrich Kramer, he went to Pope Innocent, and he wanted to get rid of all these witches and these warlocks, and he wanted to do it by any means necessary, which was basically, we're going to torture these people to death, and we're going to get their adrenaline up, and we're going to collect their red stuff, and we're going to, you know, use these people as innocent lambs to the slaughter, right? So he goes to Pope Innocent VIII in 1484, and he gets Pope Innocent VIII to write this declaration. allowing Heinrich Kramer the ability to basically murder anybody he wants. Because the Germanic kingdom, all the kingdoms are, again, the Pope is on top of the pyramid. So Heinrich Kramer can't even go to the kings of the area, the monarchy. He has to go to the Pope because the Pope's in charge of everyone. Yeah. So it was because of this paper that around 40,000 people lost their lives. 40,000 under Heinrich Kramer because the Pope signed off on this documentation allowing do what?
When was this?
In the late 14th or the late 15th century. So getting up to the late 1400s. So this started off. This was the kickoff to now we're going to see these witch trials happening everywhere over the next few hundred years, right? So 40,000 people lost their lives, mostly women, to Heinrich Kramer, the superstitious psychopath, as historians call him, as he's being backed by Pope Innocent VIII. I'm sorry, did Jesus or Yahshua ever do this to anyone? Did he ever have a witch trial? Did Yahshua ever torture anyone to death? No. He healed people. He loved people. So the fact that the popes, who are supposed to be God's representative on earth, are signing off on this slaughtering of humans.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend actually has a theory around this. He believes he let me borrow a book about it, that part of what these witch trials were doing. So within our DNA, as we, in my DNA and Shanti's DNA and all y'all's DNA, you carry memories from your ancestors too. So not only do you carry your own past life kind of reflections, but you also carry, sometimes you might be afraid of something, not from a past life, because there's a DNA, so one of your ancestors might have experienced. You see this in nature a lot where like energy kind of gets passed on to us, that's how like horses know to stand up right away when they're born, so my boyfriend has this theory. And I think he's quite right that all of these witch trials, starting here in the 1400s, going all the way to Salem in the 1600s, all over Europe, that these witch trials were also done not just for like SRA purposes. There were multiple reasons. But he believes a lot of these witch trials were done for us today, for the 2020 flu that went around, because we are instinctually so afraid of homeopathic medicine that will listen to pharmakia.
Yeah, that just struck a chord with what you just said.
That's what my boyfriend, he thinks that they were doing all of that, all those 100 years with our ancestors and maybe us in past lives, so that we would instinctually, when, I don't want to say everything that they suggested as homeopathic means, when that was, so we would poo-poo it and we would run from it. And we run straight to the government and want them to protect us because we are instinctually afraid of the powers that be. Because last time we dealt with homeopathic stuff, we had the witch trials.
Yeah.
Which is I think he was very, very, that was very
interesting and a very good point to ponder.
Yeah, I have
at the very least. Wow.
There's a book somewhere. I have it somewhere. I'll have to find it and show you guys next week. Here it is. Catastrophobia.
Nice name. Catastrophobia.
So this is the book he has that gave him the idea that all of the catastrophobia. If you guys, it's Katastrophobia. The Truth Behind Earth Changes, and it's by Barbara Hand Clow. And that's kind of him reading this book a long time ago, before 2020 ever came, is when he was like, oh my God, I think that's why they did the witch trials, was because of us, and that where they were planning on going and getting us to be instinctually afraid because of what happened to our ancestors, to use homeopathic remedies. So we would run to get this from Dr. F. Yeah?
Makes a lot of sense.
So anyway, very interesting. So Innocent VIII is the one that kicked that off, basically. Now, Pope Innocent VIII was also heavily involved in the slave trade. Yeah? We're going to see this with Borgia too. The popes were very much involved. They had their hand in the slave trade. Cassandra, she said, I'm RH negative and get called a witch. Girl, you just join the club. Shanti and I are both O negative, and we get called witches all the time. So, girl, you came to the right place. You're amongst friends. You're amongst friends. So, you know, we're back, baby. All the witches they burned before, we're back, baby. You can't get rid of us this time. So he was heavily, now he claimed his propaganda for the slave trade was that he was trying to convert the heathens, you know, those savages in Africa. He was trying to convert them to Christianity. We know that's BS, right? We know that's BS. Yeah. Right. Now he would gift people slaves. Like the king of Argon, he gifted him 100 slaves, 100 Moors. Did Jesus have slaves? Did Jesus own people?
You know, this is exactly what, you know, when we say you shall know them by their fruit. This is exactly what we talk about, you know. It's about, it's so true, you know. I like the comparison you draw there, you know. Would Jesus do that, you know? A lot of how I live my life, especially when I'm in a difficult time, is what would Jesus do now?
Yeah.
You know, and for me, it's a very good grounder, because it makes me start thinking beyond my physical being. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, sure, it's actually incredible, right? It is absolutely incredible if we think about all of these things and how everything just fits together.
Wow. And the problem too is like with what was going on, and of course this is again leading up to the Protestant Reformation. At this point of the Renaissance, according to the mainstream narrative, we're coming out of what's called the Dark Ages. So most people would not have known how to read and write, and they most certainly would have not known Latin, right? So that's, most of these services were held in Latin. So I would have to guess that most of the common folk of the Europe, and we're talking about Europeans because this is definitely this is a European story. Most of the common folk probably did not know the story of Jesus or Yahshua, did not know that. I think that's more of a new thing, because, you know, a lot of these witches, people called witches, were still, you know, before Christianity is one of the newer religions, even though it's the most powerful religion in the world. It's definitely got the most blood on its hands. But for most of the European, if you have European in you, or like Shanti, me, of European descent, most of our ancestors for most of history were what they called, I mean, the church came up with the name pagan. That's not what they called themselves, but they practiced, the Europeans before Christianity came in, it practiced there's a lot of similarities between like what the Europeans were doing. It was very nature-based. You know, they worked with the seasons, a lot like what you see of the more African faiths or the Hindu faith. There's a lot of similarities between these old religions.
Yeah, it's literally working with the elements. I mean, if you go back to ancient Bushman days, that's exactly what they did. And I mean, it is, you know, they discovered fire.
Yeah.
But also to look up at the stars and know what time it is, and to check in the distance and what have you, and then they have a 3-day weather forecast. Yeah. It's like being so in tune with nature, knowing, you know, that, okay, so if a snake bites you or something bites you, that's the plant you use that's going to counteract that. But, you know, it's not only the plant, it's the mindset that you cultivate.
You're part of that flow of nature.
Exactly.
That's all the
and then that becomes, you know, the physical aspect then becomes the manifestation of what's happening here. So when you become conscious of these things, when we start understanding them at cellular level, not just in our thought process, when it becomes part of your being, part of your everyday practice, you kind of like go into it like that level, and then consciousness expands, right? So yeah, I mean, it's
And that,
super
but think
interesting.
about what they're doing, since most of these people didn't even know who Jesus was, but they were living under the Christian faith because they couldn't read or write and no one bothered to tell them. They just
Yeah,
ordained rules on them. And so they're still trying to practice intuitively what they know as their culture as Europeans. I think people forget that about the Europeans were the first to be colonized by the church. They were the first ones.
it's true.
They were the
That's
first
true.
ones.
And it's so true what you say, that you know, just dumping rules and restricting people is the first and the easiest way to get rid of your intuition and
Exactly.
your inner trust.
And
So
you have
because now you're completely complying to someone else's desires and needs, and that is completely breaking and stifling you. So that's how they would have done it then, exactly through slavery, you know,
and through
and
the beating
only
down of the Europeans, that they were, you know,
exactly.
Europeans dared. How dare you take turmeric to try to help somebody who's got inflammation? We're going to burn you alive at the stake. They're pulling you. Can you guys see it? Like, look back at you see it. Them pulling us away from what we intuitively know and keeping us
Exactly.
in a state of
And in
fear.
this day and age, it's done through modern technology, the cell phones. So
Yep.
we always say, I mean, you know, you just got to look at people walking in the street, especially the youngsters. I mean, it's insane how crazy that is, right? And then it was done through physical slavery or something like that. Now it's really just done through mental slavery and actually spiritual slavery as well, because a lot of those people that don't have a clue. I'm sorry, I don't mean to, I don't want to be judging anyone, but when you look at some of the stuff that's out there and what people are doing, it's for me on another level how far we still have to grow as a
Oh,
human.
we take
Yeah,
3 steps forward and 5 steps back. You know,
right.
and I've said that that's my biggest issue with the quote unquote great awakening. Like, we're not awake. People are still going to church on Sunday. Like, you're not.
Right.
You haven't figured out that the church is a part of the problem. That there's no Yeshua, there's no Christ in the church. Church, the name church, it comes from Kirk, which comes from a demon. A demon name that is just supposed to mind control you and feed off of you. That's the demon's purpose. You know, and my boyfriend's talked about this before. Historically speaking, Christendom brought this idea of having a meeting house to go to, like we call it a church. If you look at all the ancient religions, it was done at home. Your
Yeah.
worship was done at home. You still see that in India. In India, people have puja rooms where they do their own worship, and so you were given your own independence. But when you're told now you have to go to a
Your
particular,
body is your church. Your
yeah,
body really is, you know, your existence. I mean, you can be, sorry to interrupt you, Brice, but it's just like, to me, it's like you can have two men sitting in a jail cell, right? One sees bars and the other one sees beyond the trees.
yep,
You know, so it's like it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of how we choose to look at the world. It's a matter of how we understand how things work. And based on that, this is really also the time of really now applying the tools that we've been taught.
yeah.
This is the time where, you know, Catherine and I did a show actually on Friday. And it's really talking about, you know, just because we've woken up does not mean we've won. And I said, absolutely not. I said, this is where the work begins.
Yep.
Now that we've awoken, having this great awakening, so to speak, we've woken up to a whole lot of shit, right? So what we've chosen to be at this time. Otherwise we wouldn't be here, you know. And now it's up to us to figure out, and, you know, through prayer, through connection to God, to the divine, your divine creator, you know, you then establish which road you need to go down. And that is done intuitively and through faith and trust, that you have that connection with your creator, that you can walk this road. And that's is needed right now, is that we walk this road with faith and trust and not giving our power away anymore, not being subdued, not being submissive, not being controlled.
Yeah.
We've got to, you know, all of that whole mind slavery, physical slavery, like you were talking about, is really just an opportunity for us to break through this matrix. right?
Yeah.
And then once we break through the matrix, there we are, on the other side of it.
And we're seeing
that
how
comes through. Yeah.
the New World Order walked through the front door with the creation of religion, because it's putting people in that state of fear where they fear themselves. And so, anyway, yeah, we're seeing, this is exactly this. This is the starting point of what we're in now. We're the cause and the effect. We're the effect of the cause that happened back then. It's still happening now, but they were just doing it more openly then because they didn't have the uprising that they have now. In 1492, Pope Innocent had a stroke. This is allegedly when he started drinking the breast milk of women and the red stuff from young children.
I actually temporarily forgot about that. That is the most insane, depraved act. I mean, it's just disgusting.
It's disgusting. Now, I think my personal opinion is he was doing this all along.
And now just gave himself an excuse to do it openly and freely.
And I think the powers that be, I think the powers that be knew this was getting out, and so they said, "Oh, this was historically. This was because he basically, the story goes that he was given the red stuff of young boys in hopes that it would cure him. So, and they admit in history that there were 2 10-year-old boys that they drained of the red stuff, so killed them to give to Pope Innocent." And the historians kind of applaud it, like, "Oh, that was the opening to a blood transfusion. That they were just trying to, we're not that stupid. We're not that." He was doing this all along. And how did they know? How did they know at that point that drinking the red stuff could bring youth back to you?
Right, exactly.
Because they had done it.
So there was already what era was this again? Sorry.
He died in 1492.
So late 1400s. I mean, but it probably was carrying on since forever. Yes, I mean this kind of stuff has been carrying on since forever.
I think this is just the controller's way of hiding it. Like, oh, look, they were trying to do a blood transfusion. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. Well, how would they have known that the red stuff could make you youthful again if they hadn't already been using it?
And trying it. They would have been testing it since forever. Yeah.
Math ain't mathing on that one, folks. Common sense. Somebody's had a stroke on their bed, and all of a sudden you have the bright idea, let's drain 2 little boys, and that could bring them back to life. How would you even put 2 and 2 together if you hadn't already experienced the red stuff in its potency and its
power and the power that it wields? Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we ain't that stupid. We ain't stupid. We got common sense. That doesn't make sense. But anyway, he died on the 25th of July, 1492, a wicked, narcissistic man who hurt more people than he helped. He is now buried at St. Peter's Basilica. You could go visit him. I've been to St. Peter's Basilica. You can go visit Pope Innocent if you want. Take a little Kool-Aid and just pour it on his grave. In 1507, he was moved to the House of the Holy Lance, which is still in St. Peter's Basilica. Again, he left behind lots of illegitimate children. One of his child ended up becoming a very big banker, blah, blah, blah. But that was the Pope before, drumroll, before Borgia, which I cannot wait. Oh, I cannot wait to get into the Borgias. The Borgias are just so wicked, and they're so...
Is this the same Borgias of these 2 brothers at the moment?
What do you mean?
Okay, maybe I'm thinking of something different. Okay, now probably I'm. Don't worry.
So Borgia, there's a Showtime series called The Borgias. Listen, I've said this before. If Showtime or HBO decides to do a whole television series based on your family, you probably have some childhood trauma you need to work through, because HBO, Showtime, they don't pick families who are kind and nice. They're gonna pick the most. They've done stuff on the Medicis, they pick the most scandalous. So Borgia, and we're gonna talk about first. We're gonna do Rodrigo Borgia first, the father who became Pope Alexander VI. Then his kids. He's got a lot of illegitimate kids, but 4 of his kids were his favorite, and 3 of them were very scandalous. So we're gonna talk about Rodrigo Borgia first. Then we're going to move to his daughter, Lucrezia Borgia, who...
I just want to know, give me the name of how you spell that, Borgia.
Borgia. Borgia.
B-O-R...
And I have
CIA.
heard allegedly, and I don't know if this is true or not, but we can speculate that the Pope we got now, the one that's the Pope now, is a descendant of the Borgias. He's in the family line of the Borgias. Don't know if that's true or not. I don't know how to prove that, but I've heard that being spoken about.
No, it's not like them, because there's two brothers, actually French brothers, and I'm sure their names are the Borgia brothers or something like that. But they're also somehow very strange looking, like these high cheekbones, and I'm that's what I'm saying. I'm looking at it, doesn't look like they're popping up here. And but very powerful in the Cabal, from what I understand as well, and literally have magical powers. Literally, I mean, I saw some TV footage or whatever at the time, and there again, you never know if it's been doctored, but I'm gonna just take it at face value. That literally, they got annoyed or something, and literally everyone on set died within a X amount of time.
Yeah. So when do they live? They're more modern.
Yeah, they're around now.
Oh yeah, the Borgias lived in the 15th and 16th century. But as far as so their original spelling, I'll just go and tell you guys, the original spelling of Borgia was Borgia because they were Spanish. But we're going to talk about next week how they changed their spelling to fit in with the Italians. And then we're going to talk about Lucrezia. I just decided to do ladies first, so she's going to be the first child we speak about, and then we're going to go to Cesare. If Cesare wasn't so damn hot, he's another hottie from the past, but he was a son of a bitch.
Do we have pics of him?
We have pics. The guy who plays Cesare Borgia in the Showtime series is juicy and cute. He is a really good looking boy. Jeffrey Lyons plays Rodrigo Borgia. And then this guy, I think he's a French Canadian actor, Francois or something. I'm like, of course his name is Francois. He plays Cesare Borgia in the Showtime series. He looks a lot like the actor that plays Cesare, looks a lot like the paintings. Now the interesting thing about Cesare Borgia, which we're going to get into deeper when we talk about Cesare, he's the Jesus painting.
Right. And wasn't that the boyfriend of Michelangelo?
Yeah,
Da Vinci.
Well, whoever painted the first VG, that's actually Cesare Borgia, which I think that there's a whole lot more to that story. I think they did that intentionally. I've heard that there's an actual picture of Yahshua under the Vatican Library, the real Yahshua. And of course, I think they intentionally gave us a picture of the original. There was another French Canadian, a guy named Sergei Monas. I covered him a long time ago. He died in the 90s. He was exposing something called the Toronto Protocols, which is the first time they ever talked about Project Bluebeam. So the original Project Bluebeam was to put Jesus in the sky, not an alien, but Jesus. And so he exposed it. So then they had to change it, and then he died of a heart attack. So my thought process around this is that they gave us an actual image of Jesus based off of Cesare Borgia, who obviously is part of this group, the Sephorius group, so that every single person across the world has an image of Yahshua. Even for me, even though I know that that's Cesare Borgia, I have an image of Jesus in my head that's ingrained in my head from what I saw, which is actually Cesare Borgia. Like, that's the reason why Jesus is so freaking hot in all those paintings on your churches, because it's actually Cesare Borgia. You got Cesare Borgia in your church. It's not Jesus, it's Cesare Borgia. And he was a hottie, So he had a lot of admirers, both female and male. The scandals around the Borgias, it's what image is it? It's the Jesus picture, the long brown hair, blue eyes, just everything you see of Jesus.
The very famous looking, I mean, if we think of Jesus, I think the majority of us think about him looking in a certain way, with the long hair, the blue eyes, that's Cesare Borgia.
And I've talked about this before. It's I mean, this is facts. Like they've already, there's so much information, so it's not like a grand secret. It's Cesare Borgia. That's the picture. The Sacred Heart.
Of course, the real question is, what did the real Yahshua look like?
Well, they say that the picture under the Vatican, he was a mulatto. He was half black, half white. Very dark skinned. So, we obviously now know, going through the missing books of the Bible, that he was Egyptian. He was not Jewish. He had Jewish students, but he himself was part of the priesthood. he and Magdalene were of Egyptian heritage. So, yeah, so yeah, the Sacred Heart, any image is all the images. They all look the same of Jesus with the brown hair, long brown hair, blue eyes. That's Cesare Borgia. And Cesare Borgia was very good looking. So hence why the Jesus guy you got in your church is very good looking, because it's Cesare Borgia. It's not Jesus. It's Cesare Borgia. The Sacred Heart is interesting because that actually with him, we don't have the Sacred Heart in Protestant churches, but the Catholic one, that's actually is a sign for cannibalism. When you show him opening the heart like that, that comes from more Nephilim stuff, more giant stuff where they would open the heart. That's a sign of cannibalism. Which we know that happens. I mean, Christianity is based around cannibalism. Like the communion is cannibalism, right? So, yeah, they'll tell you it's a symbol for one thing, but no, Falcon Soar, I'm gonna have to disagree with you. I've done my research into this. He was not from the line of Judah. That's propaganda from the Cabal. That's not true. Remember that the Bible's been edited over 50 times. They've changed the stories in the Bible over 50 times. Yahshua, and there's a reason why. I want you guys to think about that. We can't really say it on the air. There is a reason why they made Yahshua Jewish. Think about the Rothschilds. Think about what we can't talk about. We can't point out faults in certain groups of people because of the anti-S word. I'm not going to say it. So there's a reason why they made Yahshua Jewish. I'm not saying we love Jewish people. Jewish people are awesome. We're talking about the powers that be. There's a reason why they manipulated that story. Jesus was Egyptian. Yahshua was his name. Yahshua ben Yosef. The J sound didn't even exist back then. He was Egyptian, as was Magdalene. He had Jewish students. He had Greek students. He brought everyone in. It didn't matter. But he himself was not Jewish. There's so much evidence of this. Like there's just it's beyond, the Bible's been edited over 50 times. It's not the word of God. It is a completely contrived book. God, and again, if in your mind God is limited to a Bible, then you don't understand God. You don't need a Bible for God. You don't need a book to know God, So I would just be very careful with that. And that's why Falcon Soar, that's why, this is a good example of what we're talking about. That's why we're not awake yet. We're not ready because so many people are so brainwashed and addicted to what the church, no, real Christy, I've done my research. I'm not deceived at all. I'm good with God. I'm totally good with God.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
I'm
People
good.
are going to have their opinions on that, and of course, a lot of people have been taught that, and
that's just brainwashing. It's programming. I would really encourage you guys for your own to study the missing books of the Bible, to look into the etymology of the word church, look into the etymology of the name Jesus. Like, look at everything. We know that what we've been taught is not true. Well, Christy, I would say if you're not hating, I would just say instead of telling me I've been deceived, I would encourage you to go and research this stuff. Research what I'm saying. Instead of just projecting on me what you've been programmed to believe, I would encourage you to go.
I would agree. I've always maintained, and and I just want to wrap up because I do need to wrap up. I've got another show coming up shortly. That on this channel, we expose a lot of things. I'm not scared of exposing things. So we talk about things which I know the general public, I've often come under fire with that as well. If you're looking at the moment as well with Jesse as well as Brice and our recent shows, exposing so much around the Mormon church. I mean, that's a powerful church to tackle with. There's a lot of stuff, so we're not scared to expose the stuff at all. And of course, people have different opinions, and and that's fine. But I encourage us absolutely just to be respectful.
She said, I just know how deceptive the devil can be. Yes, Christy, the devil's in the church. Church is the name of a demon. Yeah. And the Bible, and I would say you said send a link. There is a lot of, it's not just one link. This is years of research. And I will assure you that I am very much in line with God. I'm good with God. Yeah. And I promise you guys, when you start to look at the stuff they've omitted, you start to
Okay.
listen.
Look, yeah, I think you know, we know that you've done a ton of research on that, so I'm going to move forward from that.
Yeah. I just ask that
everyone.
these Christians please be kind, because we've all been programmed, and it's not just the politics and education and medicine, it's everything. And as we look
Yeah.
at with this Pope we just looked at, this is the top of the puppeters, yeah. And yeah, I would encourage everyone just to research. We talk about this Great Awakening, do your own research, but then nobody will research. They just throw
Yeah.
stones at each other. Like, do your research. If I can research, you guys can research too. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Okie dokes. Well, as always, it's awesome to have you. Love your knowledge. Love your research. So everybody, I will see you at 6 o'clock my time, which is about 40 minutes from now, with Lynn Monet. Awesome lady that beyond reality. So, you know, she's very gifted in terms of the spirit as well. Has worked and seen with a lot of things that the naked eye doesn't see. She's just great. So, and always appreciate you, Brice. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in on the chats and etc. And take care. God bless you all. And you all must be good now. Be good.